Fred's American Road Trip.
All the latest now. Here's the ITV News at 10.
Pitch to be PM, Truss and Sunak hit the campaign trail to win over Tory members. The clear blue water between the two, tax.
What is not affordable is putting up taxes, choking off growth and ending up in a much worse position.
If the government goes on a huge borrowing spree, that is only going to make the situation worse. I think it would be inflationary.
On day one of their journeys around the country to ply their policies, one poll of Tory members already gives the Foreign Secretary a commanding lead. So with 6 weeks to go, how does Sunak turn it around? Also on News at 10 tonight. In memory of 200,000 lost, the chair of the COVID inquiry vows to be ruthless in her pursuit of the truth.
I'm double vaccinated, double boosted. Symptoms are mild.
US President Joe Biden tests positive for coronavirus. Emma has the latest in Washington. That Diana interview and yet another humiliating apology from the BBC, this time to the former nanny of William and Harry, and a huge payout in damages. And from a care home in the Blitz to a grand country house, the magical life story of how Queenie met the Queen.
Who would believe me met with royalty, mingled with royalty, and I can't sometimes believe it myself.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. Most Conservatives would argue that living in within your means and cutting taxes are twin planks of their party's ideology. Yet Rishi Sunak's immediate focus on the first and Liz Truss's on the second have driven a clear wedge between the two leadership contenders. They kicked off their appeals to local Conservatives today for the keys to number 10. The gloves were already off over the economy in Sunday night's debate, and even today no punches were pulled. Despite calls for an end to damaging blue-on-blue attacks, Ms Truss said again today that her opponents' policies would lead to recession. Mr Sunak said going on a huge borrowing spree, as he put it, to fund tax cuts would make inflation worse. Both claimed the other's plans would lead to defeat at the next election. It is going to be a long but significant summer.
How are you going to get
There are only two people who can be the next Prime Minister, and the scrutiny is ratcheting up. Liz Truss is under pressure for wanting to fund tax cuts with borrowing, but she says she would not break the government's fiscal rules.
I'm very clear that they are about £30 billion worth of costings, and those are affordable within our current headroom. But what is not affordable is putting up taxes, choking off growth and ending up in a much worse position.
In Rishi Sunak's latest video, he's pretty excited to make it through to the final two. He says the Truss plan would make inflation worse.
I think it's quite a conservative value that we have to live within our means, and that borrowing a lot, passing on a big bill to our kids and our grandkids, racking up bills on our credit card just isn't a good thing.
Both candidates made their pitch to Conservative councillors today.
I went in with an open mind. I think it's important to hear, each candidate's policies. However, I do think I will be supporting Liz Truss throughout the campaign. I do think the right vision for the country is to reduce tax.
At the moment, I think I'd be backing Rishi. Purely because I think he gets it. He understands how to bring the inflation down and cost of living.
But listen to these Conservative students. None originally supported either candidate, but all now back Truss over Sunak.
Rishi, I think, encapsulates everything I believe wrong in British politics.
I think that Rishi he's out of touch.
But they don't support Truss because of her controversial economic policy. They support her despite it. So you all support Liz Truss, but hands up if you think her economic policies are not right and need to change.
Liz Truss has a slightly fantastical idea that we can just borrow and borrow to cut taxes.
Even though her economics is, potentially not there, not at the point where I would like it to be, I think also she's incredibly wooden. She will not win us the next election.
And if that's not exactly reassuring for Liz Truss to hear from her supporters, it's even worse for Rishi Sunak to hear from his opponents.
And Carl is in Downing Street tonight, the ultimate destination for one of the candidates, of course, Carl. So here we go. And a new poll of Tory members puts Liz Truss pretty far ahead, really, doesn't it? It's a commanding lead, but there are some significant questions for her from significant quarters.
Yeah, that's right, Julie. So Liz Truss wants £30 billion worth of tax cuts. That means she either has to spend less or borrow more. Now, she said that she's willing to borrow more to fund that. The Institute of Fiscal Studies, very respected independent economists, say that that would probably mean she would have to break the government's own fiscal rule, which is about reducing the debt as a percentage of GDP. She disputes that, of course, but there is a more fundamental problem, which is about whether or not more debt matters. Now, here's the thing. We found out today that in June, the government spent £19.4 billion in debt interest. That's a record. That's £19.4 billion of our money for which we get absolutely nothing except the loan of money that we've already spent. That's more than the budget for the Home Office for an entire year. Now, many people think that does matter. Certainly Rishi Sunak thinks that matters. In fact, as you've said, he believes Liz Truss's plans would cause even more inflation. But Conservative Party members don't seem to mind all that much, or at least they're willing to give Liz Truss the benefit of the doubt, because a YouGov poll out today gave her a 24-point lead over Rishi Sunak amongst the people who will be voting to choose the next Prime Minister. In theory, he's got 6 weeks to turn it around. In practice, they can start voting in just over 2 weeks' time.
Carl, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, finding answers to how the UK ended up in lockdown and with 200,000 people dead from coronavirus will be an immense task. Today, the retired judge who's leading the inquiry set out how she plans to tackle it. Baroness Hallett wants to start soon to get those answers before another pandemic strikes. She'll do it in stages so lessons can be learned as the inquiry progresses, and she's determined to hear from the family and friends of victims. She said she will not take no for an answer from anyone trying to block her investigation.
The first coronavirus death in the UK.
More than 1,000 people have now died.
More than 10,000 deaths related to coronavirus.
1 year and 100,000 dead.
That number now stands at more than 200,000. Lobby's dad, Femi, was one of the first.
My dad was a very happy man, and he kind of just spread happiness wherever he went.
At 60, Lobby says his dad was also fit and healthy until he caught COVID.
More could have been done. It feels like there was no reason for my dad to die. I do blame the government because it was their watch, it was their decisions, it was their inaction.
Lobby has waited more than 2 years for this moment, the opening of a public inquiry, which promises to finally give families like his some answers.
Those who have suffered the most want to know if anything could have been done to prevent or reduce their suffering, and that is why this inquiry has been established.
Such a relief. I think what I want most from this inquiry is learning. As someone who lost my loved one in the first wave, I cannot describe the frustration and anger seeing mistakes being repeated.
This memorial wall gives you some sense of devastating scale, and names are still being added, lives are still being lost.
Bereaved families will be able to share their experiences with the inquiry as part of a public listening exercise, but the campaign group that represents them wants them to be treated as core participants, which would mean they could give evidence, ask questions and contribute ideas.
The first phases of the inquiry will look at how prepared the UK was for a pandemic, the government's initial response and the impact it had on our health services. And there will be more to follow. But today, some care workers say they feel they're being ignored.
To ignore that area of society that suffered the most is unfair. And you know, more attention should be focused on our industry and what we went through as caregivers and care providers.
For some, today is a start, but this inquiry will be a slow process. For now, at least, the wait for answers goes on. Chloe Keedy, News at 10.
Well, the leader of the free world is isolating but working in the White House tonight. President Biden has coronavirus. It started with a slight cough last night. Today, his doctors reported a runny nose and tiredness, mild symptoms as they and later the president himself made clear.
Hey folks, guess you heard this morning I tested positive for COVID. But I've been double vaccinated, double boosted. Symptoms are mild, and I really appreciate your inquiries and your concerns. But I'm doing well. I'm getting a lot of work done. I'm going to continue to get it done. And in the meantime, thanks for your concern and keep the faith. It's going to be okay.
That message from President Biden a little earlier. Emma's in Washington, and I suppose despite that upbeat tone at 79, the president and indeed America will be taking this pretty seriously.
Well, that's what's behind this video message that we've had released in the last couple of hours, Julie, because there really is a wish from the White House to keep that narrative going, that there's absolutely nothing to see here. The president has COVID, he's been vaccinated and double boosted, and that they don't have any great concerns for his health, and that's why he's able to keep on working. The pandemic has really shadowed this presidency since before it began, and it's been quite incredible, really, that over all these years he hasn't caught it yet. It has been something the White House have been braced for, and today the inevitable did appear to happen. And you know, he's had a fairly hectic schedule over the last few weeks. He was in the Middle East 10 days ago, meeting with various world leaders. He's had meetings in Washington over the past couple of days and was also meeting with the Ukrainian First Lady just 2 days ago. We're told that he was tested on that day and was found to be negative, but then it was yesterday when the cough developed and this morning when he tested positive. He is being treated with antivirals, but you can be sure that they'll be keeping a very close eye on his health over the coming days.
OK, Emma, thank you. For anyone who followed the collapse of the marriage of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, the received wisdom then was that he'd had a relationship with the young prince's nanny, Tiggy Legg-Burke, even that she was pregnant. And yet it was a totally fictitious rumour used by the then BBC reporter Martin Bashir to trick Diana into giving him that interview. Well, today, the BBC finally paid damages to this wholly wronged woman, a very large amount, and Chris is here to take us through the detail of this. I mean, it is layer of deceit upon layer of deceit that emerges every time you look at this story.
You know, I think that's right, Julie. I think viewers might be thinking, haven't we heard the BBC apologise for this programme before? And they'd be right, we have, because after there was an independent inquiry by a chap called Lord Dyson, the BBC apologised for the deceit in the programme. What was that about? That was about the faked bank statements. That was about claiming to Princess Diana that her staff was spying on her on behalf of MI6. Well, you know, the programme, which I think people will obviously remember from 1995, today this was about a woman called Tiggy Legg-Burke. She was the former nanny for William and Harry. She was at the High Court today, once, of course, a private assistant to Prince Charles. Now, this was about Martin Bashir claiming to Princess Diana that Tiggy had an affair with Prince Charles. She became pregnant and a claim that she had that pregnancy terminated. And the BBC, no wonder, they said today, we let Princess Diana, the royal family and our audiences down. I think that's putting it mildly. And you think that Tiggy Legg-Burke has lived with this for 25 years. That's a quarter of a century. And in court today, they said that she's been living with this suspicion and disbelief, which has affected relationships with those close to her. As for Kensington Palace, nothing from Prince William today, but you do remember he made that very powerful statement last year when he said, look, he thinks the BBC contributed to his mother's fear and paranoia in the final years of her life. What more could he say, really, after he said that last year? So a new low, I would say, for this particular BBC programme.
OK, Chris, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, barely a week after Russia's invasion, the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson was taken. 5 months on, Ukrainian forces are desperately hoping and trying to win it back. Through all that time, some Ukrainians have stayed put, but now they've been told by their own side to leave ahead of a counter-offensive or risk becoming human shields. So they're escaping any way they can, the fit and the frail.
It's a long ride to freedom, and hundreds of Ukrainians have liberated themselves by using these bicycles to flee Russian-held territory and reach free Ukraine. They continue to pile up, a testament to the yearning of people who have endured Russian oppression to throw off that yoke. Many have the equivalent of white flags tied to their handlebars, for the journey is perilous. And these are people actually making that journey. They've taken to the only road that offers them the possibility of making it to free Ukraine. They pass cratered fields. They have to do this the hard way because Russian soldiers have stolen their cars. They ride bicycles or trudge on foot. They look exhausted, but have to keep going. Their government wants them to flee the Kherson region because the Ukrainian army is planning a counterattack. The Russians try to prevent their escape so they can be used as human shields. These are bicycles used by the most recent arrivals, and this is the road they came down. Where I'm standing is the equivalent of Checkpoint Charlie. People trying to flee Russian-occupied Kherson know they've reached freedom when they get to this point. This man is one of those who pedaled out of Russian-occupied territory. You must have been frightened. Of course, it was a frightening journey, he said. Nobody wants to be shot in the back. What was it like living under Russian occupation? Some of the soldiers were normal, some were animals. They would get drunk and drive through the streets, shooting and throwing grenades into houses. Girls were raped. They went hunting for victims. To describe the extent of it would take all day. This video shows the lengths the Russians are prepared to go to stop some of the bids for freedom. These drone pictures were shot by a Ukrainian army intelligence unit. It's a tough watch for the soldier operating the drone. It touches my soul, he told me. Many of these people are elderly. I want to give them all the help I can, but I can't. Any intervention would get us all killed, but it's very hard to stand idly by and watch them walk, or sometimes crawl. Inside occupied Kherson, Ukrainians hoping for liberation continue to protest and confront Russian soldiers. At the same time, others liberate themselves by escaping. The will to live a life of freedom again is so strong they can endure being reduced to human livestock to get there. John Irvine, News at 10, Southern Ukraine.
Well, of course, our intelligence services are keeping very close tabs on Russian forces in Ukraine and on President Putin. In a rare interview, the head of MI6, C, to those who like their spy book code names, said he expects the Russian campaign will have to pause because their forces are, as he put it, running out of steam. Rohit's here to talk to us a bit about this. I mean, extraordinary to hear from Richard Moore in any case, but a significant assessment here. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, and unusual to hear an intelligence assessment delivered like this on a stage. This is in the United States earlier today. What he's saying is that the assessment of MI6 and MI6 intelligence have been right on several occasions in the run-up to this invasion, is that they really see that the failure of the Russians to get manpower and equipment to the front line will inevitably mean that in the next few weeks there may well be some sort of operational pause. This was all delivered by the man known as C, Richard Moore, who delivered this statement earlier today, and here's what he had to say.
And I think they're about to run out of steam. I think our assessment is that the Russians will increasingly find it difficult to supply manpower, materiel over the next few weeks. They will have to pause in some way, and that will give the Ukrainians opportunities to strike back.
Now, what he's not saying is that that means inevitable and imminent victory for the Ukrainians. What he is saying, however, is that there is an opportunity in this war of attrition, which is moving incredibly slowly, for the Ukrainians to strike back because of Russian failure in the very near future. And he addressed another really important point. There's been so much speculation about the health of Vladimir Putin. There have been so many rumours online and in the real world suggesting that he has some sort of terminal illness. Well, he said today, and this has been echoed by the CIA as well, that there's no evidence of that whatsoever.
OK, Rohit, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, the block on Ukrainian grain exports that has inflated food prices around the world just might be nearing an end. At least 22 million tonnes have been trapped by the fighting. Tonight, the Turkish government said it hopes a deal arranged by the United Nations will be signed tomorrow afternoon by Russia and Ukraine. It'll allow exports to resume through the Black Sea under carefully controlled conditions. So we will keep a close eye on what emerges on that tomorrow. Now, the bitter split across America over last month's US Supreme Court's decision on abortion has set one state against another, with many women caught in the middle. Nowhere is this more true than in the city of St. Louis, which straddles the state line between Missouri, where abortion is banned in all but the most exceptional cases, and Illinois, where it is legal.
Every few weeks on a suburban street in Missouri, Laurie Lamprick sets out on a short trip that's part of a long battle to ensure abortion is available to those who need it.
I am a volunteer driver, so when folks want to come to Illinois to get a procedure done, I will help them get to their appointment.
Abortion divides America as emphatically as the Mississippi River splits St. Louis. The west of Laurie's hometown is in Missouri, where abortion is now banned. The east is in Illinois, where it isn't.
A lot of the patients I pick up are lower income folks who, I mean, for a lot of them, the reason that they're doing this is because they can't afford to have a child. So it's just absurd to think that if you can't afford a bus ticket, you could still, raise a kid. There's the state line. So we are now officially in a territory where abortion is legal again.
Legal, but not easy. At the clinic, Laurie's passengers still have to get past protesters wearing high-vis jackets to resemble staff. It's awkward and often intimidating.
I mean, they'll literally yell and call them murderers and things like that, and, you're killing babies.
Pushing abortion back into the shadows is a consequence of decades of protest by people like Sam Lee.
The actual ideal is for a woman to think of abortion as unthinkable.
He's helped ensure Missouri is one of just a handful of states where abortion is only possible if a mother's life is in danger. There is no exception for rape or incest.
Isn't the reality that you're putting their life in danger then by not letting them seek abortions?
If their life or health is in danger, then they can get an abortion under Missouri law.
And that includes their mental health?
Well, not under Missouri law. And if you start talking about mental health or psychological health, then it becomes wide open, because our experience is when there was a broad health exception, doctors would perform abortions for any reason, any time, claiming that it was for health.
The solution, he says, is more funding for maternity homes like this one.
If someone calls us and they have or leaning towards the decision to abort, we can give them education.
The centre works with women like Janetta, who already had a young child when she got pregnant again.
I was actually prepared to sleep in the car, figure out where I could take a shower. I have this 5-year-old that's looking at me like, we can't stay here,
So Janetta exchanged her independence for a safe place to stay and help with raising her baby. She has no regrets, but no time for the ban on abortion either.
I don't think that it's right. I think that women should have that choice.
But choice is quickly falling away, with the Senate failing this week to protect a woman's right to cross state lines for an abortion.
The simple thing of driving somebody across the river, it might open me up to legal consequences at some point. I mean, I'm going to keep doing it because it's important, but there are definitely lawmakers here in Missouri that are trying to criminalize the volunteer work that I do.
Abortion in America now, not just about politics but geography, as in cities like this, the right to choose fades away. Rachel Younger, News at 10, Missouri.
The drama at last night's Euros match between England's women and Spain's was enough to get even the coolest of heads excited, and that excitement is already rubbing off on their young fans as England prepare for Tuesday's semi-final.
The fans who had cheered them on were by full time on their feet. But some supporters went one step further. These primary school children lined up alongside the Lionesses just before kick-off.
It was very nerve-wracking. Yeah, we had butterflies. And also it was exciting and we couldn't wait to get out there. Yeah.
What did you think of how England played?
They played really well. Even though it wasn't an 8-0 game, it was still really good.
Of course, I'm a human being too. You try to stay calm, but this was so close and such a game.
England's opponents in the semi-final next Tuesday will be either Belgium or Sweden. They beat Belgium in the lead-up to the tournament, but Sweden are ranked second in the world. If they make it through to the final, they'll face either Germany, France or the Netherlands.
Go England! Go England! Go!
These children, along with the nation, will be watching and willing them on. Amy Lewis, News at 10, Brighton.
Finally, for children growing up in the Second World War, being evacuated could change their lives. So it was for a little girl called Queenie Clapton, now 95 years old, who was sent from a children's home to a stately home near Windsor, where she mingled with real royalty.
Well, it all comes flooding back to me.
Queenie Clapton is 95, but today she's a teenager once more.
I just have so many happy memories.
Back at the house that changed her life, with a lifetime of secrets to tell.
Well, I just can't believe it myself sometimes, and did I really do that? Because that's why I've never told anybody about it.
It's the story of a troubled childhood transformed, that the pain of a 7-year-old taken from her parents is still raw.
Till in the end they asked me who I'd like to live with, my mum or my dad. I didn't understand the question.
Queenie was eventually taken into care, but when the Blitz came, she was evacuated.
The city having been mercilessly bombed throughout a whole night.
From unhappy care home, she moved to a grand country house, Englemere Wood in Berkshire.
I just was in awe, I suppose, of everything, yes. And as I got to the ballroom and the garden outside, oh, gosh, and that was our playground.
The fortunes of war had smiled upon her. The Englemere girls were a happy band of sisters.
We used to have tea in the garden in the summer and cake. We never had cake any other day, only Sundays.
And they had illustrious visitors.
The princesses came here, had their photos taken with the children.
It wasn't the end of the royal connection.
And of course the princesses did a pantomime at Windsor Castle. I can hear her now, Princess Elizabeth called, "Come into the garden, Maud." And she had a bench there. "I have a seat for you," she's saying, trying to get Margaret to come out and join her.
Queenie went on to help care for a godson of the Queen's father, and in time to have children of her own. But her life is a legacy of two women, Dorothy Payton, Englemere's owner, who welcomed so many evacuees, and matron Edith Bailey.
She taught me and all the girls everything I know. To be true, honest, never give in.
The past is another country, but it's a land Queenie has never entirely left.
Who would believe me met with royalty, mingled with royalty, and I can't sometimes believe it myself. But of course it's all perfectly true.
John Ray, News at 10.
We love her story. That is all from all of us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.
Tomorrow, we're live from latitude